Right, hey guys, how we doing? Back another video from Totally Not Mark, and we're checking how is JoJo's review of Part 3, Part 2. So, the second half of Part 3. Because Part 3 is so long, everyone, whenever they discuss this series or they do anything with it, they always split it in two halves. They are technically kind of different stories as well. The first part is like, we gotta get to Egypt. And then the second part is like, just as long, but they're in Egypt, trying to actually find Dio now. And fighting against his, new people. I can't remember what the different cards are that he brings out this time, but they have different abilities. We get one of the best stand battles, in my personal opinion, in this, which is a dog and a bird. I love the stand battle between those, and yeah, let's see what Totally Not Mark has to see, because apparently as well he had seen all this beforehand up to this part, so now it's all new for him, but we shall see what he has to. So yeah, I hope he really likes this, because this is the best bit of Part 3.
2.5 parts of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, all of which I had seen before. However, today
right,
marks the starting point for when I start covering material I've never seen. Everything from here on out is entirely new to me, and this story is one of the most legendary and iconic arcs in manga history. And now that I finally finished this long, sprawling journey across the world with Jotaro and his crew, all I can say is, what an adventure, and what a finish.
Oh,
Since last week's video focused heavily on the philosophy and circumstances
yes, actually go into the story this time.
This week I thought it might be fun to break down the story in greater detail and to explore my favorite stand battles from this entire part. Next week I'll be covering Diamond is Unbreakable, but right now let's dive for one last time into the climax, to the ambitious, popular, and heartbreaking second half, to the emphatic conclusion to JoJo's Bizarre Adventure's legendary final act in a trilogy spanning 3 generations. This is the tragic, the epic, and the staggering finale to Stardust Crusaders. Alright, so as I said last week, the story in the first half isn't really anything worth writing home about after the initial setup, which saw Jotaro's mother Holly fall ill thanks to her stand magic, Jotaro and his friends journey to Egypt using their stand magic, and once they get to Egypt, they realize Dio isn't there and they have to travel and fight some more using their stand magic, until eventually we get to the big fight with Dio at the very end, where they will finally get to see his stand magic. Last week I didn't really get to cover much concretely within the story, and so this week, before I dive straight into the second half's material, I will first rampage my way through and break down all of my favorite stand battles from the first half.
Right, okay, cool.
Ready? Let's do this!
Alright!
Strength. Early on in the story, there were plenty of introductory battles from the skies to the water, but none of the early stand battles taught me more about the possibilities that this new mechanic offers than chapters 17, 18, and 19,
wow, what happens
all
with
entitled Strength. Typically speaking, after a half-decade of studying narrative theory, I, like many others in my position, tend to get a sense of what direction the story is going to take. And so, when a story can shock or surprise me in ways I wasn't expecting, that really means a lot to me. It really heightens my personal experience.
JoJo's just like really tips expectations over.
With Jotaro and the rest of the Stardust Crusaders on a small boat in the middle of the South China Sea somewhere, after... yeah, some stuff happens. Suddenly, as if by magic, our heroes seem to have caught a break.
Oh, the boat, which is a stand. Yeah, which is cool.
A giant ship without anyone seemingly on board appears as if from nowhere, granting them access aboard. What I loved about this short encounter wasn't necessarily the nature of the fighting or the thrill of the stakes or anything like that. It was eerie. But more so, as soon as I saw this, I knew something was up.
Yeah, it's like, what's going on? Yeah, there's a lot of mystery going on in this,
Every single scene we've been a part of since the beginning has introduced us to a new stand in one form or another, but this one really felt different, and it was. There's a sort of creepy horror element.
Oh yeah, that was weird with the girl and the monkey being like...
The orangutan in the cargo hold has in fact been behind the entire event and has a weird, creepy scene in a shower with a girl that I will absolutely pretend didn't happen in favor of praising how great it was when Jotaro beat the bananas out of that great name. His stand was the ship, and while short and it eventually becoming very clear what's going on, it still impressed me and surprised me with how robust the stand system was.
Stands can just be totally out there.
After I finished, and it only got crazier from
and for the orangutan to be that stand user didn't make the bit that happens later too much. But why am I... yeah, well...
Typical fucking idiot! That was your job, you fucking moron! moron! You cretin! You're a fuckhead!
Peep show.
That's what you are! A fucking shithead!
Good joke.
I should also mention that I won't be touching on every single stand battle in this arc. If I did, this video would be a million years long, and besides, I don't really have anything much to say about most of them other than they happened, or they were weird, or I wish I hadn't seen that. I do, however, like that since these stand encounters are so numerous,
the puppet in
they
the hotel,
offer plenty in the way of occasion for the side characters to establish themselves and to get some shine too. Opportunities that up until now have only been enjoyed by the main characters, really. And now that the gang have managed to battle their way across the South China Sea into Singapore, Jotaro, Joseph, Kakyoin, Abdul, and Polnareff finally found themselves on the Indian portion of their trip.
Yay.
As they arrive in Calcutta, where one of my favourite fights takes place.
Wait, which one's this?
Jay Guile, Hangman. This was the fight that really impressed, both from a creativity, implementation, and visual points of view. This encounter involving Kakyoin
The one in the glass.
really demonstrated the utility of these side characters, how to develop them in the middle of action, and to let their personality
Yeah, the one
show
that travels through glass and that, is it? Yeah.
Partially involves another stand user utilizing a ghost gun.
Whole horse.
Wanted his bullets around obstacles like Angelina Jolie. The vast majority of the intrigue for this section can rest on the shoulders of this one stand.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty creepy.
Yeah,
and
it's
even more
weird.
so in the manga. And on top of having an awesome design, this dude can only be seen and can only operate in the reflection of various objects and surfaces. Mirrors, shards
It was
of
like when
glass,
Polnareff sees it and he
reflection
keeps
of
looking
a
around.
piece
It's like,
of
why is it not
metal.
there? Why is it not
A person's
there?
eyeball. Let me repeat that. It hides
Yeah, anything that's got a reflective surface, he can travel within.
Within the person's eyeball. And
But he does actually
joysticking
travel,
out
and it was
this
really
thing
cool
is
seeing them to see how it
absolutely
works
crazy.
as well.
And much like the battle on the ghost ship, this fight reinforces for me why the concept of stands works so ridiculously well in a series like this. You can take any scenario, be it mundane or action-packed, and whether or not you think you know how this is going to play out,
You don't.
I assure you, you don't. And let's not forget, this Hangman guy works as a team with this gun-toting guy.
Yeah.
Who shoots and kills
good.
Abdul. This is where the narrative is helped greatly by this particular choice. Polnareff is the sole reason why they are in this scenario and why Abdul had to die. Abdul had told Polnareff not to chase after this person who killed his sister. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you. This guy killed Polnareff's sister. Dick move. Now, on top
He had the
of
two
already endangering
right
his
hands
friends,
with the two right
Polnareff now has
hands.
to contend with the
Yeah.
choices he's made that led to his friend's demise.
And then
It's
he was
honestly
the son
quite
of
sad.
the
And from a narrative
witch
point of
with
view,
the
a great choice.
stand arrow. Yeah.
Or stops contributing, something has to be done.
And that's why she's
and I'm glad
so
he got
hell-bent
the
on getting
axe here in
Polnareff
that
later,
sense.
yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm not happy he died, but from a sterile, clinical, narrative theory point of view, I'm happy they left him cold in the ground. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? But yeah, while the
It's okay to
combined
make
efforts of
jokes,
Kakyoin and
because
Polnareff ultimately get the better of this
later
Hangman,
on,
the
yeah.
combination of humor, crazy set pieces, and action really helped this fight stand out amidst the others for me. It's a
Stand
terrific
out,
section. Something also worth mentioning is a narrative I've seen prop up every now and then is that Jotaro is sort of an overpowered meathead that could have done all of this on his own. I could not disagree more with that line of thinking.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Jotaro is a competent and level-headed guy in a pinch, but
Yeah.
when it comes to discretion and or approaching and figuring out a situation,
He's very
he needs and often relies
Yeah, it
on
needs to
his
be.
friends.
He needs to have someone to like pull him back. Like, no, let's think about this.
Fast forward a number of unsavory stand encounters later, and we land on an island somewhere in the middle of the Red Sea. This is where we meet Cameo and Judgment. Throughout this seemingly never-ending journey across the Asian continent and into Africa, it's honestly a pleasure watching the heroes of this story combat all sorts of
the
interesting
kid
characters
with the
like the sun,
dream
all
one.
the while in these constantly differing surroundings. But none were prettier to me than the jungle/savannah of this remote island where Polnareff once
wishes.
again encounters a new enemy stand, Judgment. And while I'm talking about him, Polnareff in this first half seems to be getting an absurd amount of exposure compared to the rest of the cast, and I'm including Jotaro in that somewhat too.
Thing is, though,
supposedly that of the late
I think that's
Abdul's
why
if the resemblance didn't sell that fact enough
something
already,
later
this
on
stand battle
works.
again is sort of a fun one given the nature
Because
of this
he is
stand's
more
abilities.
memorable than
He's
the
sort
other
of a spinner
characters,
twist on
so.
the monkey's paw myth, where it acts as a
You know
genie
where
that
I'm
can
going
grant
with that,
any
don't you?
wish, but
I wasn't
the wishes
listening.
get all
He's
sorts
saying
of messed up.
Polnareff for some reason has more screen time than everyone
Really messed
else.
up, like, I'm talking
So what I'm
Polnareff's
saying is
sister
something
and
that happens
friend
later
Abdul
on,
coming back
down
to
the
life
line.
only to try and kill him. And if that wasn't
It's more
screwy enough,
meaningful
that's when
because
this
we have more
happens.
screen time with said. if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I've listened, yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying not to spoil stuff, but I don't see why people would watch it if they haven't seen it already, but...
Alright, so Abdul's alive, and it turns out that all of the things we saw and heard JoJo say about
And you got that spoiled by a meme.
Yes, a day before I found out.
But also, that guy we saw and thought was the father of Abdul was actually just Abdul in
Yeah,
disguise.
the whole time, yeah.
This is hilarious and cool, but I think Abdul dying in that way made more sense for his character. He instilled a lasting impression on a number of his friends.
Yeah, he gave Polnareff like a proper emotional
perilous.
boost at the time.
His return, as well as the unveiling and eventual overcoming of Cameo stand powers, are really what breathes life into the section. But I'm not sure if I like the idea of Abdul coming back from the dead in this particular section. I'm not sure
I liked it because JoJo's is so weird. It's like, it's cool.
Very easily have been Jotaro, and it would have been just as impressive, at least to me.
What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you?
And almost immediately after that, we hop into the next and last suspense-filled outing before Egypt. The High Priestess, parts 1 to 4. These are the final 4 chapters
Oh,
of
the
the first half
submarine.
of this journey before Jotaro and his merry band of misfits finally arrive at Egypt. And the final enemy stand that we meet is this guy.
So weird,
From
he
a
just
visuals perspective, at least initially,
create
it
himself
didn't
into
strike me
inanimate
as
objects and
particularly
stuff. Yeah, it's
visually
weird.
engaging and felt somewhat derivative and based on past less successful stands, like the weird blob creature that grew inside of Joseph's arm.
Yeah, and he used the
earlier in
hammer on and
series.
that to get rid of it,
However, what this
yeah.
part of the story does fantastically well is manipulating and abusing tension. Now sinking deeper and deeper into the ocean, the gang have decided to travel in a submarine next to reach their goal. They have crashed a number of planes.
So like, we got to avoid
in
public
this time,
transportation.
and
It's like,
so
you know
on
what,
their way
screw it.
to
We'll take a
complete the
submarine
catastrophe,
just
they
in
go
case, you
safe
know, let's
action
risk it.
than in a large, highly pressurized underwater vessel. Jokes aside, while this stand doesn't look that impressive initially, eventually it becomes a giant face
Yeah.
and eats them all, which is way more impressive looking than when it started out. And funnily enough, while it did start out unremarkable to look at, it did so with a bang by ripping off Joseph's prosthetic arm. Now that they are
That was
fully
cool.
and stuck
They
onto
play on the
ocean within this
prosthetics and
space
stuff
with no
like
chance
quite
of
cleverly.
escape, Jotaro looks to have been crushed.
Nah, fam.
That's pretty much the first half. I honestly liked it a lot more than I thought I would, given that it's episodic and the divide it's created within the community, but honestly, it forced me to put on my historian hat for the first time, perhaps ever, and to look at this series as a case study for the late 1980s in Japan's manga industry. It's taught me so much more than any part of any story I've ever reviewed before, and even if I look at it from my own individual point of view, the creativity and mystery that the stands introduced to the story, as well as the camaraderie built over the course of this extensive adventure, really helped.
Are you finding it a bit funny how in depth he's going with this? Because I'm a bit like, come on, here we go.
Fans prefer the second half over the first, and I know that because I took a poll on my Twitter. Apparently, like,
in all fairness,
90%
right,
of people
yes,
prefer the second
I
half,
agree.
so
The second
let's dive
half
into that.
of part
If you
3
guys want to be
is the
part of
best.
future polls, follow me on Twitter.
But the
as
first
I
half
said,
is still
the second half
really
is where everything
good.
goes down, so let's see what I thought of it. The second half. As soon as they arrive in Egypt, the status quo is shaken up to make things a little more interesting. The Speedwagon Foundation lands to give them intel on Dio's specific
Of course it
whereabouts,
does.
the status on Holly, and supplies to make their way through the desert more
And a
manageable.
dog.
Oh, and to bring Iggy to the party.
I absolutely hated Iggy at first, but let's see if
Iggy is a
Mark
dog
goes into
that
that.
has a stand, and to be perfectly honest, I was sort of scared that they were going to give this dog speaking lines, and I'm very happy that they didn't.
Yeah.
The very fact that he's largely silent endeared me to him quite a lot. Now, the fight that erupts almost immediately after Iggy's introduction
This
to the
is
party
weird,
is
the
a
water
relatively
one.
exciting and interesting battle with one of Dio's 9 stand users that each represent one of the Egyptian gods.
Oh.
Mark is now incorrectly going to refer to Endul as Endal for the rest of the video.
Endal is the first and provides a nice excuse to fill us the audience in on what's to come ahead and to show us what Iggy can do. One thing I found that was a little forced was the nature with which this bad guy does eventually meet his end.
Really?
He decides to kill himself when he knew he had no other chance, lest he divulge information to Jotaro's party about Dio, and you know what, that's fair enough, but then he goes on to tell them stuff about the situation with Dio. It's thanks to
okay, I
him
can
they
kinda
know that the 9 stand
give you
users
that.
are manifestations of the Egyptian gods. It seems like you didn't do what you said you were supposed to do there, guy. Oingo boingo.
Okay, I can give him
and
that.
bastard. This is a really cool idea for a team of stand users. When I first heard about the concept of stands, I really wasn't all that enthused. In my mind, I sort of saw them as glorified Pokemon battles, only instead of 6 monsters fighting by your side, you have only one.
What is that Raichu?
That way, I had totally missed the
Is it
point
a
of what
Raichu?
stands are and where their
Yeah, I think
strengths
it's an
lie.
Alolan
They are
form.
all
Right.
mystery boxes waiting to be opened. Whenever a
New
new stand
Pokemon.
user makes himself
New
or herself
forms of
known,
old
there's a
Pokemon.
number of anticipations, but none perhaps more interesting than how that user will use his or her stand
G1 all
and
the
how that
way.
will force the heroes to fight. In other words, it's possible that you can get tired of constant Pokemon battles because they can be somewhat predictable. However, when it comes to stands, the nature of how
Oh
the
my God, they
specifics in
change
the
all the time,
altercations
yeah.
play out is entirely different almost every time, and few are more out there than the brotherly team of Oingo and Boingo.
Oh, mate,
With Oingo
yeah.
possessing a stand that can alter his appearance, and Boingo who possesses a
Book that
stand
sees the
that
future,
can predict the near future through comic panels. And while other encounters are quite formulaic, as I mentioned, the variety in how these formulas play out are so diverse that while I was reading, I found myself to get honestly excited to see what the next stand will be on the horizon. Not to even mention how the heroes would react to it. Where other battles are quite serious, others like this are honestly fun and filled
It was
with
hilarious.
slapstick.
Such a funny
Watching these two
episode.
brothers try to manipulate
It's like
the
you've got to
future
follow
their
it, follow it,
benefit,
follow it. If you
all
don't
the
follow
while
it, and it's like,
Jotaro
wait,
and
no.
Don't
And then if you...
even realize they're
Ugh.
trying to take them out, it's a really fun idea for a short story and one that ended blowing up in the face of the bad guys.
Literally.
And even after this, with stands like Anubis and Basset, these are all variations on
Now,
previously
Anubis
spoken about
was the
formulas
sword
of this
that possessed the
episodically
user,
structured
wasn't
arc.
it?
I mentioned Power Rangers last week as an example of formulaic or episodic storytelling. That comparison was just really to explain the concept. However, one thing I want to avoid is making it sound like JoJo and Power Rangers share anything in common besides their episodic nature. While the structure of the encounters largely remain the same or are consistent throughout, the variations and creativity implemented with how these encounters take place are almost
different.
entirely unpredictable.
Yeah.
In other words, there are no such issues in this department with Stardust Crusaders. Chapter after chapter, I continue to be blown away by the means with which Araki has creatively told this story. I mean, the 6th chapter encounter with the Basset stand user was honestly incredibly
Oh
well
my
handled.
God,
If someone
these
were to
scenes
come
were
to me
so
with the concept
hilarious.
of this stand, with it increasing your magnetic pull slowly over time, you'd naturally think it to be boring, but Araki managed to make that one of the most memorable fights in the series for me. Watching Joseph slowly become
There's when
attracted
Abdul's
to
got his head
larger
in
and larger
Oh
between
my
Thingy's
God.
crotch and he just keeps moving.
control of the situation was not only funny at times, but quite tense as the snowball effect continued to cascade down
That's when they're stuck against the
It's a
thing and it's
terrific
behind him
idea
as
for a
well.
power, and it only gets better
Sorry.
from here. The Darby Brothers.
The Darby Brothers were great. The Wicked, Mr. Joestar.
The battle for lost souls.
So you got the gambling
with the
one,
Darby
and then you got the
Brothers.
video
Unlike
game one
all
later.
the other stand battles, the first of the two brothers' battles doesn't revolve around direct contact. It's something much more interesting, and while I was reading through this section, my heart was in my stomach. The means with which
brilliant,
this
isn't it?
section of the story caters to its big finish is fundamental but exceptionally well orchestrated.
It is a
and
proper
dimensional.
gamble the way he
Kicking
does it.
things off,
It is
Darby
just
the
like,
Gambler
oh.
gains the attention of Joseph Joestar by admitting that he knows the whereabouts of Dio Brando, and eventually the team gets sucked into a series of gambling games. In exchange for the information,
For their
Darby demands that
souls.
players bet their souls. It seems straightforward, and honestly it is, but what adds spice to this simple conflict is that Darby the Gambler is a swindler. Someone
Yeah, he
that is
cheats,
incredibly
man,
adept
so you
at
gotta
cheating without getting
out
caught. And this
cheat
becomes apparent
the
throughout the
cheat.
games with Polnareff and Joseph Joestar respectively, with the latter showing us just how far Darby is willing to take things in cheating, and demonstrates that if the player has lost it in his mind, then the soul exits his body
Yeah.
anyway. I don't want to spoil the actual games that are played because I really want to encourage anyone who hasn't checked out this series or this section to definitely check it out. It's very, very fun. They are tremendously well-crafted pieces of competitive story writing, and the ultimate battle between Darby and Jotaro was
Mate,
honestly,
it's
at
sick.
this point in the arc, my absolute favourite battle in the series. And to think it was just a game of
Yeah,
poker.
it is one of
way
the
it's
best
handled,
ones.
the
It
way
is one of the best
it's
ones. I
told,
swear
the
to God, if he doesn't
climax
talk about
is a
Iggy and the
phenomenal
bird
culmination
stuff,
of the building
stand
blocks
battle.
that the prior two gambling games set up. Check this one out if you haven't already. It's amazing. I think the funny thing about this arc specifically is that while I can understand and empathize with those that label all of those stand battles as stalling tactics leading up to the one and only fight that matters in Dio Brando finally coming into conflict with the JoJo family, I can't help but ignore all of it because the vast majority of these stand battles, particularly in this second half, ranging from what I've already spoken about, like the likes of Oingo Boingo, Endal, Basset, and Darby the Gambler providing a range of different and unique battles that honestly couldn't have happened in any other series, onto what I haven't spoken about about, like the unlikely team of a Boingo and Hull Horse, and the thrilling battle between Iggy and Pet Shop.
Yeah,
the latter of which
so
made me care
good.
so much more about this little dog. I mean, in the manga, apart from where he's first used against Endowl, Iggy doesn't really play that large of a role, but in this outing specifically, he's the courageous one and takes out one very dangerous
It's such a good fight.
sustaining significant injury in the process. But enough blustering, it's time to go on to the next derby.
He mentioned it, I'm happy.
Darby the player.
Oh, the video game stuff. Here we go.
They've reached their goal, and this is where the second and final Darby brother makes himself known. Darby the player. Funnily enough, the two brothers, while they share the same sort of power in that they steal souls from their opponents, their respective philosophies are mirror images of one another. One cheats and one plays by the rules.
Yep, I like that.
Sort of. Where Darby the Gambler played much more traditional old school games like poker or games of chance. This brother, on the other hand, likes to take things with a much more modern approach.
The video games. It's a baseball.
Video games. Sealing Kakyoin away in a creepy doll, and oh yeah, this dude collects creepy dolls. These games are fantastically entertaining, and again, if you are so
animation's
inclined,
so
I highly recommend
weird on
checking
them.
this out when you get the chance. Naturally, everything boils down to Jotaro and Joseph, with Joseph's commentary hilariously bellowing throughout the confrontation.
It's brilliant.
Watching this old man try to make sense of Jotaro and Kakyoin's approach with
What's
these
the
video games
what's the funny
was
moment he
honestly
has where he's just like
hilarious. And somehow
yes
Araki
or
managed
something
to
like
make
that,
Jotaro
or
look like a boss while playing a video
Can't
game
remember.
for what I think was his very first time. Naturally, Jotaro wins the day, and with that
Yes,
said,
yes,
this brings
yes.
to a close the warm-up portion of this story. Next up, the final hurdle
Vanilla
for
Ice.
Dio, the final obstacle, and it's a doozy. Vanilla Ice. This is where the fun and games stopped, both figuratively and
Yeah, it's
literally.
all serious
Unlike the
now.
fun-loving and playfully dangerous nature the vast majority of these stand users have been, Vanilla Ice is a devout follower of Dio, is his right-hand man, and totally psychotic.
Yep.
And interestingly, all the while Jotaro, Kakyoin, and Joseph were trapped playing Darby the Player's twisted games, Abdul, Polnareff, and Iggy fell prey to a much more insidious fate.
Don't forget as well that like they kept up the vampire thing and made Vanilla Ice immortal through giving him Dio's
This
blood.
fight specifically shows the true power
So they haven't
of
forgot that
Stardust
aspect of
Crusaders.
Dio's
Over the
character.
last 130 some odd chapters, we have gone on the adventure of a lifetime with these characters. We've got
Like, so the Hamon had a moment and the vampire thing still
from
gets its
Japan to Hong
thing
Kong
as well.
to India to Pakistan. Through conflict, disaster, and loss, we followed and gotten to know each and every one of these individuals as true heroes.
Yeah.
And now, for the last time, Iggy, Abdul, and Polnareff enter a battle together, impressing upon us the ruthlessness and powers Vanilla Ice has in store for these warriors without hesitation, and by way of
He don't care, does he?
in an
Nah.
attempt to take out both Polnareff and Abdul, Vanilla Ice launches a deadly attack.
Oh yeah, Abdul saves him, right? Again. And just like that.
The type of battle that takes place here is unlike anything we've seen from this part before, and
It's
I'd
so
wager the
dramatic
entire
and
series
dark,
upwards
it's like,
of this
whoa.
point. The level of paneling in this part, the connection we feel towards the characters, and the torture we see on screen that made me feel extremely uncomfortable at times are truly new heights met by this series. From Abdul's emotional sacrifice to Iggy's giving Polnareff a second chance at life. Two fantastic characters that made me truly feel something, perhaps even more so than Caesar in part 2. This is Stardust Crusaders at its absolute best, and to think we still have Dio to contend with.
Yeah, we haven't even met the bad guy yet. It's like,
The stage
what?
set treacherously by Vanilla Ice, our heroes totally out of the loop, clueless as to what has just transpired, Holly on her deathbed, and Dio now at full power. These are but a few of the pieces placed by Araki in this final volume within the Stardust Crusade. Having spent what felt like an age with the characters of Polnareff, Abdul, and even Iggy to a large extent, to say I was feeling severe melancholy after the events that just transpired, battle-wise, would be an understatement. Having been hidden behind a series of intense shadows for the last 9 volumes,
there he is.
this final volume, this page, this is the moment we finally get to see Dio. The final boss of Stardust Crusaders. This is the moment, the last 3 parts and 265 chapters. This battle, this is the one that has defined 3 generations of Joestar, and it's all coming to a head now.
Behold. In all his glory.
Pictured atop a staircase full to the brim with both confidence, poise, and power stands Dio, and at the bottom, limping his way
He
towards
does
what he
not
believes
care
to be
that
certain
Polnareff's
doom is
there.
his one-time follower turned deserter, Polnareff.
Oh yeah, he
Through
worked
this
for him at the
sequence,
very
Araki
beginning, didn't he? I
demonstrates
forgot
exemplary
about that.
paneling
Yeah.
and storyboard, creating a very
Jeez.
specific atmosphere. And that's not the only technique implemented in this scene that builds its tension and power. Forever intimidating, Dio seems to have gotten into the mind of Polnareff, who, after climbing to the stairs, seems to be traveling down it. Or is there something more sinister
But there was also a hint at
going
this.
on here? Polnareff seems to
With
have made
Whole
up his mind.
Horse, he
He's
tried to
enjoying
shoot
him,
Dio
but it isn't
in the
looking
back of
good.
the head, and
That's
Dio
when we
just
see it.
appeared behind him.
Dio's
It's like,
stand.
whoa, so we got a hint at this. It didn't come out of nowhere.
Drowning the scene in a pool of light, dancing up the stairs towards Dio, he is forced to flee farther into the shadows. The gang's back together. Time to go kill the ultimate vampire, and I am all for it.
Hell
You would think
yes.
that all the build-up this character has received would feel unjustified, but as I was reading through these chapters, the sense that this was truly a story spanning lifetimes felt overwhelming. I can't stress just how gorgeous and well orchestrated the following events are panelled, or just how clear it was how much effort and planning went into its design. The circumstances and set pieces involved in what would eventually be the final fight scene of the arc make up the absolute, without any hesitation from me, what I call the very best material contained in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure that I've seen.
Yo.
Kicking things off, Dio cuts through the town, single-handedly taking out Kakyoin without learning the nature of his stand. A vital
wow, they're
piece of
using the
information. However,
very
just
original
as Joseph
OVAs.
is
You've seen the
about to
animation here,
tangle with
babe.
the Prince of Darkness,
Nope.
suddenly,
Whoa.
Yeah, like, so there was OVAs that came out firstly, and they started with part 3.
this
remember you telling me
is
that.
Yeah.
vital. Little does Joseph know that he's just received a massive hint
It
as a
got
result of
nothing
Kakyoin's
on the
dying
animation that
effort.
was used in the,
I loved this dynamic
Yeah.
with these two supporting characters in that it fulfills Kakyoin's
Yeah,
character
look at
wanting
it.
to stand up for what he believes in and overcomes his fear in the face of his former master, showing his growth over the journey. And now we rely on Joseph Joestar's defining characteristic, his intelligence, to decipher and relay this very important piece of information to
So
Jotaro.
weird
And
seeing the
he
animation on
uses
this.
Hammond with his stand in a really cool way. It's a great idea, so my day was made with that decision.
Oh, so iconic.
Once again, as a character that purposely has been shown to emote very little, in this instance, when
Shows
he
a lot,
witnesses the potential
yeah.
death of his grandfather, the once stone-cold expression of Jotaro starts to show a fleeting, but definitely present, crack on its surface.
I think that's the beauty of
And
it,
this
isn't
fight
it? It's
that
like,
ensues is unlike
as
any
soon
I've ever seen
as
in
there's
not
something
only
big
this
going on
series,
with
but
him, you can
perhaps
tell.
any other fight I've ever watched.
Jeez,
Araki
it's so
makes
weird seeing these old
100%
animation
full
things.
use of the mechanic in ways so creative it carves out a special place in my heart. This is a true fight of good versus evil, and it uses that to its advantage in every way imaginable and conceivable, and then invents new ways. For Dio to cut through the crew like a chainsaw cuts through
He really
butter
does
moments
melt
prior,
them down.
when he eventually fights the last JoJo standing in his way, when we see him show genuine concern facing this Kujo Jotaro as the fight proceeds, my stress is translated so readily to that of relief and desire to cheer on Jotaro. Now, I'm not sure how much of a role 2020 has played in my enjoyment and appreciation of this story, but a core element of what helped me enjoy this more than I thought it would is its lack of nuance with regards to a good versus evil type story. All over popular media now, there's an abundance of villains propagating our screens with motivations that can be justified through
Yeah, like,
their warped and sometimes
you kinda like, I get
justifiable
their
vision of the world.
thinking
This
behind it.
is something I greatly appreciate when it comes to storytelling, and I still do to a large extent today. However, I think partially due to the complexity, negativity, and disaster after disaster that 2020 brought to all of our attentions, I realized I needed something different. I
Yeah.
needed something straightforward,
It's just something
simple,
fun.
and heroic to get behind. A story spanning generations, culminating in this moment where Jonathan's grandson and great-great-grandson find themselves facing insurmountable odds against the epitome of evil, Dio Brando. A villain that, while pure evil, adds so much to the story in way of weight, consequence,
So weird
design,
seeing this animation.
that goal being defeat Dio and save the world.
Save the world.
And that is absolutely something I can get behind. And you know what else I can get behind? This ridiculously fantastic
Hell
strategy.
yeah,
that
get
employs
Star
all of
Platinum to like
JoJo's
get your
best
heart going
attributes
back
to
again.
get this skull-shattering shot off on Dio. He stops his own heart to lull him into a false sense of security, and boom! I don't think I've seen a punch more satisfying than that one right there.
And you see the skull fucking
stop. And to be honest, I don't think that's
and he's like,
battle. It feels fittingly evocative of every emotion he's trying to bring forth from me, and is easily my favorite part of this entire series. It features some revolutionary action sequences and ideas that even now reading through in 2021 feels like it could work if released last week. It's truly timeless.
Amazing,
the back and
isn't it?
forth is amazing, with Jotaro slowly bending Dio to his will, forcing him to take more and more desperate and underhanded measures. But eventually, through sheer will and determination,
he just overcomes
Jotaro
it.
annihilates Dio. The plague that has haunted his family for generations has finally been vanquished, and
Be
it was
gone,
incredible.
vampire.
This series, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, was one I was incredibly reluctant to dive into earlier this month, but I am so incredibly happy that I have. And not
Everyone
just that,
says that.
I've shared it with all of you.
Weren't too
Thank
sure
you
at
all
first.
so much
I
for
thought,
your amazing support in this series, and it's not over. Next week is entirely uncharted
you've missed some really
territory for me,
funny
when I tackle
moments.
JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Diamond is Unbreakable, Part 4. So, what are we waiting for? Let's dive right in.
doop doop. Boop doop doop. Boop boop doop. Boop. Yeah. I'll be around the world. I miss, like, he should have mentioned the ambulance bit afterwards, where Joseph is pretty much dead in the ambulance, and then Jotaro's there, and they've got Dio's body. In fact, I didn't even mention that. Dio becomes stronger because he takes Joseph's blood. Because of having Jonathan's body, he uses Joseph's blood to make himself stronger and be able to control the body better, and that's why he becomes all emo looking.
And he gets a haircut.
Yeah, it all goes away. So then, at the end, they have that really funny moment where they're beating him, they got them both in the ambulance, and then doesn't Jotaro go, can't you, like, transfuse the blood into Joseph? And then they do that, and then Joseph wakes up and goes, ah, Jojo, you failed! You know, looking all evil and that, and he's about to kill him. He's like, no, I'm joking. Trying to make it look like the Dio's, like, taking over his body.
I genuinely believed that when I watched it.
Yeah, I was like, whoa! And then it's like, no. And then they take Dio's body to the beach, and the sun comes up, and then, boom.
And we see his remains, we see his skeleton, don't we?
Yeah, like little bits in the bag and that, but yeah, like I really like these reviews. Just anything that gives me a chance to like reflect over JoJo's without watching JoJo's, even though I love JoJo's because I've watched JoJo's twice. I love it, so I'm really glad that Totally Not Mark is reviewing these things. Part 4 is going to be cool. My favourite villain. I found his tie on Amazon today. I can't wait to, and I'm looking for a suit to go with it as well. And you straight away were like, "What is that for cosplay?" And I was like, "No. What if we go to a swanky do and I want to just dress up like Kira and like get away with it?" So yeah, as soon as his Part 4 review goes up, I will get it up as soon as I can. And then we got the Part 5 review, and then that's gonna be it, innit? Like, unless he's although no, I'll tell you this now, guys. If he's doing Part 6 and 7, anything that's just manga only, I will not be checking out his reviews for, because I am waiting for the anime versions to come out. So I apologise if he does carry on after Part 5. Just putting that out there. But thank you very much for watching. What did you guys think of that? What did you guys think of this? Click like, subscribe if you want to leave comments down below. Let me know what you want to discuss in future videos, and I'll see you guys. It's all you guys next time.